So I thought we could discuss the importance of faith in practice. Why, for example, it's the first of the 5 faculties, the faculties of a noble disciple that the Buddha described. The first one is faith. And in many occasions it's said that yoniso manasikara, which the Buddha said is the condition for the arising of the right view, it depends on faith as well. So, and because there's a certain sort of tendency, especially when Buddhism came to the West, where it's thought of as like it's not really something you have to accept. It's more like something that you take it or leave it, depending on whether it resonates with your experience. Like only the parts that resonate with you and that seem true to you, you accept, and then the rest you can not consider it part of Buddhism if you want.
You can pick and choose from within the Buddhist teaching,
exactly, basically. Yeah. So definitely there would be some benefit to that. So to whichever extent the person adopts it, it would be beneficial. But it's a different question now to say whether it's possible to attain the right view based on such an attitude. So we can start by contemplating or reflecting on how would a lack of faith obstruct not all practice, but let's say sufficient practice.
How does lack of faith obstruct the practice which would otherwise result in stream entry?
And, or more acutely, before we even go into that, what is faith? Because some people might hear that word and might confuse it with the faith in God or something like that, faith in Christianity. But there are some overlaps, but they shouldn't be thought of as exactly the same thing. So we could clarify that first, like what is faith?
This is something that I thought was interesting. There, I think in a few suttas, it talks about kind of discussions among householders in the Buddhist time, and specifically when they would speak about other householders who were basically that they kind of held in low esteem. One of the things that they would often say is like, so-and-so is faithless. He does not have faith. And to me that was interesting because that kind of, it wasn't faith in something specific. It almost seemed like it was pointing to a specific type of attitude that could be brought towards different things. So could a person who is seeking some kind of, or basically somebody who's beginning a noble search, have faith, even if it's not? Could they have the attitude of faith, even if there's not yet something that they're kind of putting it into? I guess is the question. And my thought is it would kind of have to be that attitude of like admitting you don't know and being open to the fact that somebody may know.
Which already presupposes that you have acknowledged that there's a problem. Right? If you don't recognize that the house is on fire, then you wouldn't make any move to get out.
And you wouldn't feel that there is a need. You wouldn't see any value in somebody who knows how to put out the fire because you think the house isn't on fire.
Yeah, so it begins by having some recognition that there is suffering, which is actually in that same sutta which says that yoniso manasikara depends on faith. But what does this faith depend upon? Well,
I think it's another one, but it does say, there's definitely, the statement says, suffering is what gives rise to faith.
Yes, this is what I was trying to get at. So somebody needs to have recognized that having been born is not one big party, but actually fairly problematic to begin with. So they need to be honest about that. And then the faith rises, like, even the Buddha, who did not find in the end a teacher that showed him fully the way out, but even he had that faith, like an escape from all this must be possible, because otherwise this is just a doomed situation, which he did not accept. That is, in essence, it seems to me, what faith is like. It's not worthwhile going on with any of this, so that there has to be a way out. That is the basic attitude, it seems to me, of faith, at least how it starts. Then once you have discerned a way out, then the quality of that faith changes in the suttas, right? The faith of the noble one is not in its nature the same as when you start, but we can discuss those distinctions later on.
Yeah. So it's that the component of faith is what enables you to push beyond what your current situation.
Yes.
To put it that way, because actually it's even part of that mundane, quote unquote, mundane right view that the suttas talk about, that says there is mother, there is father, there is given, there is the result of action, and at the end it says there are ascetics and Brahmins who have understood this world and the next. So then that's already something that for many might be hard to accept, like that it isn't just a kind of subjective sort of everybody has their own interpretation, and it's kind of nothing, it doesn't really matter in the end. Whereas no, it says mundane right view is at least being open to the possibility that some people have actually rightly understood, that there is such a thing as right understanding. So that's what would first of all open you up to the possibility as well that your present understanding is the reason why you suffer. That's why then faith comes before wisdom, even, because even for the 5 faculties of a noble disciple, because that faith keeps that kind of keeps you questioning yourself, because you see that there's something ahead of you, kind of thing. Like, and even the Buddha said when he I think shortly after his awakening, he said, well, I don't have any teacher, I haven't learned this from anyone, but you shouldn't live without respecting something. And then he said, well, I will then respect the Dhamma. And that's another thing that's quite connected with faith, that sense of respect. But it shouldn't be confused with, which is what I was sort of getting into before, it shouldn't be confused with piety, which is kind of the more usual conception of faith, which is like often kind of what you see in Buddhist countries, like it's kind of just a blind performance of certain observances, and but when it comes to like, well, am I seeing this as valuable in the context of changing my behaviors and my actions in daily life, that aspect is something that's more hard to find, that somebody who has that attitude. So that is more of a, like, you could put it that way, actual faith needs to have an effect on your actions. If it doesn't, if it's just a belief, well, yeah, that's what it would be. It would just be a belief. But that's not what faith really is. Faith should be connected with a sense of something that needs to be done, not just a empty conviction that you proclaim the Buddha is the best, but you don't live to align yourself with those values. So
yeah, so to get the motivation that there is also without experimenting it by oneself in the moment, but there is a way which is which has been experimented and also fulfilled by other sage, wise people, and so this in the motivation is to keep in mind.
Exactly, yes, because there has to be that quality of basically realizing how deep wrong view goes. It's kind of oftentimes people don't have that recognition. They think, oh, sometimes like I am ignorant or something like that, so sometimes I fall off the practice, but it's a much more broad. Where without faith you won't be going to the root. That's why it says without faith you cannot have yonisamanasikara. You will not go to the source of your ignorance, like, because there's always layers and layers and layers of assumptions, of questioning, things that you don't question, things that you take for granted, tendencies that are just purely based on craving, on getting pleasure and avoiding pain. So even when, things that might seem justified in the context of Dhamma, like, I don't know, helping people in the monastery or something, and then you kind of, if you don't have enough faith and you see, well, clearly the Buddha said being engaged with distractions, and he even spoke about that, like a monk who spends his time distracted, he's not progressing in the practice. But then if you don't have enough faith, it's not necessarily that you would think like, oh, that's wrong or something, but you wouldn't kind of snap out of it with enough strength to see, wait, I am actually falling into this. And that's a very coarse example, but it's to the whole range of all the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. In order to acquire those factors, you need to be willing to accept, wait, but my view might be wrong, my intention might be wrong, my speech might be wrong. At any given time, if you have faith in the Buddha, in the practical sense, you would be willing to accept that maybe you're better than before, but there's still more. And that's really that purpose of faith. And it's another thing that's I think people often overlook is that, there's often the descriptions of stream entry as understanding the Four Noble Truths and all of those things, but many people can say that they understand things, so that's kind of a very in the end it's not necessarily a very reliable criteria. But what they also say more acutely than understanding in the suttas as the factors of stream entry is that unshakable faith or absolute faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, which isn't sometimes, see that's a kind of a fine line to thread there, because it says there that they also are independent of a teacher. So see, it's not the same type of faith of like, hugging, just constantly hugging the legs of the teacher and just going wherever they tell you to go and not having a mind of your own.
Yeah, there's not blind obedience.
Exactly. It's but at the same time, it is unshakable faith to the point where, it's also said that's what would allow a community of people to live together in harmony, which is the right view. Yes. In that sense, like, and you have that other sutta where these three monks were staying together, and they say sometimes they would have an idea about something, and then they would say, oh, but why shouldn't I do what these other venerables want to do? And so that's kind of but see, you cannot get that by like, okay, now let me just not have preferences, let me just pretend that I go along with what everybody else does, because that's a byproduct of the right understanding. So it's more like an indication, let's say, that you have understood things properly, but it's not about fabricating a sense of just blind obedience to seniors or blind obedience to whoever you take as a teacher. It should be more like, okay, but I think I understand. Okay, but do I have that unshakable confidence and faith, whereby basically I'm ready to at any time revise my understanding.
Yeah, can we say that faith is that quality or faculty that prevents you from stagnating, but you keep digging deeper until there is no doubt? So that is right, because in other traditions there might be an attitude like somebody suffers from doubt, and then you say, don't doubt, believe, right? And then the belief becomes the sort of the opposite of the doubt. But what we are saying here, it seems to me, is no, cultivate doubt because you have faith that there is more to be understood.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is quite a different take on what faith is.
Yeah. It's faith would have to. Faith is what would allow you to admit that you're still subject to doubt, because that, like you said, it will make you push far enough, will make you dig deep enough.
Until you find that which cannot be doubted. Basically.
Yeah, and then you have. But if you have automatically, when you don't have faith in something, you have faith in yourself. That doesn't take like a conscious effort, or faith in your views. Let's say faith in whatever you happen to be in your current kind of situation. And in order to make progress, you need to have faith in something other than yourself. Like that's at least in the context of Dhamma. Well, even actually in mundane terms, like if somebody's taking a treatment from a doctor and they have more faith in what they think is the right thing to do about that illness, and then the doctor tells them, well, you're supposed to wake up at 2 a.m. and take this pill. Don't take it at any other time of the day, only at 2 a.m. But if they think they know better, they will take it whenever it's more convenient, or not take it at all. And because of that, they won't get cured. So it's not necessarily a kind of conscious choice that I choose to be faithless. It's just by not, let's say, considering that direction or the importance of that direction, and most importantly, by not seeing the predicament that you find yourself in. Like if the person also doesn't feel that the sickness that they have is such a big deal, they might, have. Sure, they believe that this doctor knows what he's talking about, but if they don't really feel that sense of urgency to cure themselves, then that also will lead to a lack of faith. In the proper sense, as I just said, faith that affects your actions, not just your beliefs.
Your actions and your beliefs, plus the cure is not necessarily pleasant. So in order...
Well, yeah, waking up at 2 a.m. is not...
so in order to sustain the right practice, which is not necessarily pleasant, there needs to be the faith which is going to bridge that gap, because that faith is saying, no, that displeasure that you now suffer from, that can eventually disappear if you stick to this. So there is somewhat of a relation, particularly in the beginning, between faith and time. Like the only pleasure you know is sensual pleasure. That's painful. You don't know anything else, but there is the faith that it is still worthwhile to restrain those sensual pleasures, because to be free from that is more peaceful, even though that peace you presently do not have.
And of course, again, it cannot be like I just decide to have this belief that it's possible to be free from sensual pleasure. You need to have seen the problem of your current situation. That's the only way that the faith has that proper footing. As we said, that depends on suffering, recognizing suffering. And there's also that sutta that says, what's the result of suffering? It says either madness or vexation or noble search. And that noble search is basically exactly that. It says, actually the description says, who knows a way or two to be free from the suffering?
That's right, yes.
So that's exactly then when the faith gains a basis, where you recognize that the conundrum that you're in. And there was even one sutta I came across recently that said that there are things that are unpleasant to do, but have a unpleasant to do but have a unpleasant result, pleasant to do that have a pleasant result, unpleasant to do that have a pleasant result, and pleasant to do that have an unpleasant result. And then it says, how do you tell apart the wise from the fool? And it says it's because, even when you tell the fool, don't do the thing that's pleasant to do but leads to unpleasant results, he will still do it. When you tell him to do the thing that's unpleasant to do but leads to pleasant results, he won't do it. And then the opposite for the wise person.
In other words, the fool is concerned with immediate pleasure only,
because he doesn't have faith, because he doesn't recognize the like I've been saying, the that he needs to get out of this, the situation that he finds himself in. And that's really where the Dhamma applies. Like, the Dhamma isn't supposed to be like a public teaching for everyone in the world. I mean, sure, if people can, everyone could keep the 5 precepts, but that's not specifically what the Dhamma is. The Dhamma is for people who recognize an issue with their current way of being.
With their existence, basically, in the world. Yeah.
So that is where faith begins. And so the suttas as well define that there's various formulations of these 5 faculties, but one of them also includes the sense of fear, sense of shame and fear of wrongdoing, which also depend on faith. Because see, oftentimes, there are things that seem pretty harmless, that people might not think are a big deal. Like, some people don't think killing a mosquito is a big deal, or drinking alcohol from time to time is a big deal. But that sense of shame and fear of wrongdoing, which is, in regard to unwholesome states, which is one of the powers of a noble disciple, like, that depends on faith, in the sense that, no, it doesn't matter how, that I right now think that this doesn't seem like a big deal, because I know that I'm still subject to ignorance. So, in other words, I put the Dhamma first. I know that, okay, if the Buddha said this, and I am claiming to be aiming for the same goal that the Buddha taught, then I cannot honestly at the same time say, like, I am applying the treatment, but at the same time,
I think I know better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So,
which comes then back to what we said at the very beginning, this attitude of picking and choosing what you like from the discourses. That's going to be a problem to the degree that one has been developing faith, because the Dhamma it's one vision, it's one teaching. So this attitude of picking and choosing is only possible when there is some lack of faith.
And also, of course, the tendency will be to reject the things that you should have the most sense of urgency to accept, because that's where the wrong views are going to be most strongly established.
Because there is a natural tendency to not want to be disturbed and to be, let's say, peaceful, whereas actually, if you want to uproot the issue, then that is by definition going to be a disturbance. So
well, like I said, unpleasant now, but
so against the grain also depends on faith. Like, why would you go against the grain if you don't have faith that in the long run it's worthwhile?
That's a phrase, like, as the Buddha said, the Dhamma goes against the grain or against the stream. So only if you know that there's something better at the top of the stream, you have faith. Otherwise, everything else is going to be convincing you, no, actually, I should just keep going, because why would I just try to swim against? See, everybody else is just going down there. Why am I the only one who's swimming back up? So
but that's a very inauthentic way of regarding things, because you are already giving more authority to the group or to what everybody else is doing. But if the Buddha was thinking like that, he would never have become the Buddha.
Yeah, of course. But the thing is, these pressures and these tendencies of your mind, they might still be there, but again, faith is what allows you to go against it. Whereas if you don't have the faith as a grounding, you just go with whatever. And even the wisdom as well, it's common to have especially with Westerners, to have a very kind of intellectual, analytical approach. But if then, it's not that that's bad necessarily, but then if the faith gets sort of pushed away and not seen as important, then ignorance fundamentally is like infects the whole of your experience. And so the concepts and ideas that you might be operating with, yes, you need to improve them and upgrade them, but if that's all you rely on, fundamentally ignorance will still be sort of running the show. Whereas faith is kind of that outside sort of input, the utterance of another, kind of that outside input that, okay, yes, I have to understand it for myself. It's not just about agreeing with what this person says, but I put the teaching first, at least while I'm trying to develop it. I put the teaching first and then my reasoning second. And what I was going to say is that's actually one of the better ways to, regardless of what teacher you follow, it would actually be much more of an authentic and sincere way of going about it, to have that recognition of, well, if I have any chance of actually getting the right view and abandoning ignorance, I have to commit myself. Like I can't be picking and choosing, because that's like, imagine just a doctor who says, oh well, you got to take these pills, and there might be other pills that will have, what's it called?
Similar effect?
No, like they will sort of nullify the effects of these ones that you're taking.
Oh.
So then the person goes to the other doctor, who prescribes them exactly those pills, and then, they're taking both at the same time. And how will they know that which of the two doctors was actually, like, they have no way to know whether both of them were wrong, or whether one of them was wrong, or whether both of them was wrong.
So it's better to commit to one teaching fully, even if it then turns out to be a wrong teaching at some point. At least you can then say with certainty, this didn't work.
And that's what the Buddha did, actually.
And then your noble search continues.
Yeah.
But if you have like several teachers and you don't see contradictions between those teachings, then
you do, but you kind of just...
But then you pick and choose in order to make it somewhat coherent according to your own standards, then you can pursue that for the rest of your life. But if it doesn't bring any results, you will not be in a position to now find out what was actually beneficial and what wasn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's not a very popular approach these days. Most of the time, a sort of open-mindedness is what people, seem to prefer, rather than to just stick to one thing. But actually, that is probably a shortcoming, as you're now discussing.
Yeah, and it's not then about, because you do have that sutta where the Buddha says, how do you preserve the truth, or how do you guard the truth? And it says, until you've seen it for yourself, you shouldn't be talking as if, this is certain, I know this for sure. But at the same time, you do have a sense of, well, right now, this is what I am applying myself to. So then everything else, for now, because I developed enough faith, I investigated, as that sutta says, you visit the teacher, ask questions, investigate, ponder, reflect, then faith arises. Then you have a sense of, okay, this is actually worthwhile committing to. And at least for that duration, if you have in order to have a real chance of whether being able to judge for yourself whether that teaching was truly right or wrong, you need to actually apply it in that sort of focused sense. And that's what the Buddha did with his former teachers. Like they taught him these formless attainments and stuff. And while he was in the training period, let's say, he was committed to that practice. And only then, when he wasn't like, oh no, I'll disagree with this part. And because of that, he actually got to experience exactly what the teachers were telling him to do.
To the point that those teachers asked him to become a teacher as well. And then he said, but wait, this is not good enough.
Exactly. So you would have that sense of, because you tried it, you would see, okay, it's not because I did what I wanted and I didn't listen to the doctor. I did exactly what he said, and yet I'm still not cured. Now, at least you can tick that box, okay, this doctor is not the right one. But if you were following 10 doctors at once, like was said before, you're not any closer to
so that's confusing. And also one slightly ironic thing with this attitude of picking and choosing is like, when you see, like when you abandon that attitude, for example, and you stay with the suttas, and you discover how internally consistent actually a great many discourses are across the board, that's precisely a factor which increases faith.
Yeah.
But you would never get that if you don't question that attitude of picking and choosing.
And actually the Buddha said in one discourse that at least at his time, he asked Ananda, do you see even two monks in this assembly who have a different interpretation of the teaching? And he said no. So the fact that you feel like you need to mix and pick and choose, you don't want to come to too quick conclusions about who's right and who's wrong, but you cannot authentically and sincerely allow yourself to think that all of these people are in line with what the Buddha was teaching. Either if they're teaching contradictory things on that fundamental level, as the Buddha said in regard to this discourse I just mentioned, it was about, do you see any two monks who teach a different interpretation of the four satīpattanas, of the Noble Eightfold Path, of the four right strivings, of the five faculties? And you would see, even amidst teachers in the same tradition, you often have such very stark differences, but people kind of hand wave it away, but saying, oh no, it's just this is for people with certain tendency, and this is for people with another tendency. But that's not what the teacher is saying, though. Uh-huh. So you are kind of he's saying everyone should be doing this. Yeah. And so you kind of allowing yourself to bend it into what you think.
That's how quickly it goes.
And you don't realize as well that fundamentally you cannot escape your perspective. You can't just have a perfectly objective point of view where you're judging everything. Your standard for judging is your own view, which is what causes you suffering. It's what's infected with ignorance. And so if you don't question it, you're not really growing in that sense. You kind of, because another person, why does this other person, who also claims to be following the Buddha's teaching, why is his mix so different from mine? And then I cannot honestly claim that we're both heading in the same direction. Mm-hmm. But it's this kind of, inauthentic or shallow effort of reflection, often because, again, it's not regarded as important a lot of the times. Clarifying these sort of broader aspects is not that important. It's just do the practice, just do the meditation, and then all these things just will magically sort of piece together, and you'll unite.
That's also faith, but about a naive one, perhaps.
Well, because it's not the faith that that's leading you to question yourself, like I just said. It's kind of twisted. It's even then you would have a certain ideal of what you think Nibbana is, and you're kind of picking and choosing which practice will take me to that, instead of saying, wait, do I actually know what the goal is? And that's that type of faith that would push you back to that far background level where you're going to be questioning everything from the ground up.
Yeah, because when you just start, you don't actually know what the goal is.
Exactly, yeah.
Or you might say...
Because that's the Four Noble Truths. You don't see a cessation of suffering. Then
yeah. So you might say, well, the goal is to be free from suffering, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you've understood the full extent of suffering. Yeah. In fact, a noble disciple will have understood the full extent of suffering, because that's what's revealed with the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah, and so that's what how you get to see that without that faith, for example, there's more to this than many things that are actually just management of feelings, like feeling better, calmer, because you're managing. You wouldn't have, if you don't have faith, you wouldn't have the incisiveness to actually question and see, actually I'm still liable to suffering. So yeah, it's something that not necessarily you develop it kind of directly, but you can certainly recognize in yourself a lack of faith. And then, as the Buddha said, the conditions for faith, reflect on, do you actually feel a sense of urgency? Do you actually feel, as the Buddha said, that for someone who hasn't realized the Four Noble Truths, it's he said, because what should somebody do if their head is on fire? He said they should apply unwavering effort, diligence, recollection, perseverance in order to extinguish that fire.
Yeah.
And he said, well, somebody might actually let the fire be, not pay attention to it, and it would actually be more important to make an effort to discern the Four Noble Truths. So it's obviously kind of a hyperbole in the sense, but it goes against a common kind of understanding that, oh, we just have to be satisfied with where you are right now. Like, all these attainments and stuff, these are just more forms of becoming. And so it's more important to just accept yourself as you are now, and then just be with that. And that's how you...
Just deal with it,
Yeah. But the Buddha is saying you should see your situation as if your head is on fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's clearly a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to maybe like briefly go back to like this kind of tendency of trying to find justification, like with the teaching or with anything else, but in this context with the teaching. And I wanted to ask, like, someone can like listen to this discussion and say, okay, from now on, I will stop make justification for myself, but that's kind of changing the things to like kind of an opinion level, but not yet to the view. So I wanted to ask, like, I think it would be kind of relevant to kind of make this distinction between like what an opinion, a belief is, and what a point of view is, because it's quite a different thing.
You mean justify, like in terms of actions?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, yeah, it's when the thing is always then if you have that attitude of, oh, it's just this, I just correct this, I'm already in the right path. So whichever shape that takes, if you don't assume like, okay, I'm not justifying myself anymore, but do you stop there? Do you keep looking like, okay, but, well, do I know the extent of action? For example, like, sure, I'm restraining my obvious bodily, verbal, mental actions, but am I sure that there isn't more to this principle of wholesome and unwholesome that I'm not yet considering? So then, yeah, you accept, like, you have like an opinion of, I shouldn't act out of this, and that's something that you can acquire in just a moment. You just read a book that says, okay, don't do this, and that's it. But changing your view takes much longer. It takes training, takes upgrading your criteria for what even, like, the terms that you're using to begin with, like wholesome, unwholesome, craving, abandoning, mind, consciousness. Are those, like, do you feel like that's it? Or do you recognize, actually, even those things I cannot be sure I understand? So then when I'm saying I am purifying my mind from unwholesome states, that might not mean for me what it should mean, for example. That's how you see that there is that extra dimension between you just accepting an opinion from something you read or something somebody told you, and then developing or adjusting your view according to it. There's that extra dimension of like, how, okay, you agree with what they said, but how are you actually interpreting it internally? So 5 aggregates, that's a common example. Like, yeah, people talk about the 5 aggregates, but they never stop to question the fact that maybe their definition of what 5 aggregate constitutes is either inaccurate or too vague, or not, just overall not really referring to what the Buddha pointed to with these things. So that's what faith would allow you to consider, at least, that there's that constant improvement that needs to be made, constant questioning. Even for a noble disciple, it's not a matter of just, okay, now I just mechanically do this practice. The Buddha said even you cannot become an anagami. So sotāpanna would not be able to become anagami if they lack faith. So it's obviously they have unshakable faith, but it can always be increased and deepened further. So, but like I said, it's not something you increase directly. It's through clarification. So, first that sense of urgency. Am I covering up the sense of urgency as well through distractions and sensuality, which makes me feel like everything's all right, finding safety in the world? That's one way. Then also developing clarity. So that's when then it's not just about faith. You also have to clarify, for example, read the suttas and clarify the teaching so that it doesn't feel anymore like this vague, ambiguous kind of, yes, I have to give up craving, but I don't really know what that means. You make it more sort of concrete, and then you get a sense of what you need to do. And that increases your faith in that sense, because you see, oh, wait, it's not even like this mystical, because as you mystify things and you make them kind of put them too far away from you, then that's also not faith anymore. It needs to be faith, yes, it's over there, but I also have a recognition of what I can do, at least to bring me closer to that direction. So the Buddha called that measuring the task. Like you measure what it is that you actually need to do, and then on account of that, the faith, or you would say the desire or the zeal to do it arises.
Yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes faith can be an excuse to do something. Like, I just have faith, but you're practically not doing anything. But what we're talking about is the faith is precisely what ennobles you to go there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's not just, oh, this nibbana, I have faith.
And then delight in that faith, or right, which is sometimes like devotion, but there can be an attitude of inauthenticity, just making excuse like, yeah, I have devotion, but practically you're not really doing anything.
Yeah, devotion can result from faith, but not the other way around necessarily.
No.
So because you would still see, in the suttas, like how the monks would be, even when they were arahants, they would say, like somebody would come and ask them a question, and they would say, well, you shouldn't ask me, I'm not the one who knows. It's the teacher. The Buddha is the one who knows. And even though they were arahants.
Yeah.
So you could see that, yes, there was a sense of devotion there, but if you just fabricate that, it really makes no difference.
It's just hollow. Yeah.
Yeah.
But perhaps it can also be helpful to clarify a bit, like, in order to like find a starting point. Like faith in the suttas, even with the Buddha, it is like seeing a dead person just in the streets, somebody who is old or sick. That is what for the Buddha kindled that search, that faith. So suffering is not like, oh, I have particular problems, like my child is misbehaving, or my marriage is going down the drain. These are all particular things. Sure, that's all unpleasant, but actually that faith is on the level, as we said earlier, of one's existence. Like, even if everything is now going according to your wishes, you're still subject to old age, sickness, death. And that is where the hair is on fire. So that faith in its nature covers the whole of your life. It's not this particular situation or this particular problem that is now occupying your mind. It's much bigger picture.
Yeah, that's why we said it would have to have an effect on the way you live your life if it's genuine faith.
Yeah,
it cannot just remain as an empty conviction.
Yeah, so people can ask, is the fact that I'm subjected to old age, sickness, death genuinely a problem for me or not? So if somebody then thinks, well, this is the only life, I just try to sit out the ride as comfortably as possible, and then that's it, that's going to be an obstruction to faith as well.
And you would be surprised how many Buddhists kind of have that view, like it's oh, well, it's I'll just do the best in this life, and then whether they believe in rebirth or not, they might say, oh, well, I'll just get reborn in the next one and do my best. And
then I'll do the work.
Yeah. Like right now I have family, I have children, I cannot do it right now, I'll do it later. And that means, sure, you still recognize the value in a ambiguous sense of enlightenment, but I like to compare that to like somebody who, let's say, they already earn 100,000 per year, and then they have the option to gain 1 million. And so, sure, I would like to do that, but if it takes too much of my effort and too much of my energy, I might just rest, comfortable with what I already have. And then that's kind of the interpretation that a lot of people have behind like stream entry and all these things. But it's not something that you're gaining. It's a huge problem that you need to lose. It's your head being on fire. And if you see it in that way, that's not something that you can be just kick your legs up and, okay, I'll just stay with my head on fire. So it's if it doesn't feel like that kind of, like basically there isn't anything else really that's worth it apart from this, then you haven't recognized sufficiently the perilous situation that samsara is.
Yeah, so with the proper faith, you cannot say I'm doing this practice, but there's also something of equal importance next to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
That cannot be.
Yeah.